Well, I guess it'd be nice if I showed my face. You guys aren't hearing, huh? Working on it. You can hear me now? We get a thumbs up on that? All right. Need to get a thumbs up that the sound is good. Probably because I didn't admit myself into the stream. Okay. Anyways, I was going through this. I was going through this Ray Epps testimony. It's pretty good. It's Raheem Kassam, his Substack, and basically, without going through everything above, the congressmen questioning Epps were doing everything in their power to basically twist Ray Epps' testimony to making him seem pretty much the opposite of what we actually have video of him saying. Adam Kinzinger leading the way. There's very obvious things that any objective person, if you're questioning somebody, would have followed up on. And I'll see if I can give you a few more examples. There's a gentleman by the name of Paul Carver who he was calling the whole time, and apparently he didn't really know him, but the guy had been calling him all day. He was also from Arizona, and then they went out to dinner, and it's just really mysterious. There's a couple of other phone calls. There were people calling him that day that he just doesn't recognize the number, and miraculously, none of the people on the J6 committee wanted to follow up and check to find out who those phone numbers were. So hopefully that's a line of questioning that we get pretty soon from the Republican councils. I did see today where I believe it was Matt Gaetz basically called for releasing all 14,000 hours of unseen video from that day. Hello, Kathleen. You really respect and admire all three of you. Thank you. You deal with fact and not frivolity. Well, try to. Appreciate it. Appreciate the kind words. I missed any other chat besides everyone telling me I was muted because I'm an idiot. That's I'm actually using it's first time. It's actually the second time I've ever hosted a StreamYard. So I didn't know the buttons. Kathleen asked, "Would you be willing to check this guy out?" Yeah, post a name. I'll check anyone out. Never can have too much information. All right, going back to the story. Here's where Ray Epps saying, "We've got to go into the Capitol." And he's kind of explained that away, saying, I was trying to get some common ground. So he's basically saying he was trying to be able to influence people to not do violence. And he was going to do that by telling them to do violence. So I don't think that's going to hold water. And here he goes. It seemed to me, here's Kinzinger trying to help him. Oh, Epps says he did not hear them chanting "Fed, Fed, Fed" in his response to a suggestion, even though they're about 10 inches from his face. And Kinzinger says, "It seemed to me that the crowd, their focus at that moment was basically trying to incite violence that night. You were trying to stop violence that night. Is that accurate?" And Epps says, "Yes, sir." Kinzinger says, "Okay, that's all I have at the moment." Kassam says, "Huh? He's on camera inciting an invasion, and Kinzinger's takeaway is that he was trying to stop violence." Okay. That's going to come up pretty soon in committees. Hey, Raging Smirk. Yeah, that's a fun Sunday night show. For those who don't know, our good friend Alan Meyer has been hosting a show called For the Republic on Patriot Soapbox on Sunday nights for a while. He gets pretty good viewership. He had me on once last year as a guest, and he's had Doug on quite a bit, and Doug will co-host for him when he's not around, when Alan can't make it. So about a month ago, Alan reached out to me and asked if I would be a guest alongside Doug to go through the Federalist Papers. And we are up through Federalist number 6 and Anti-Federalist number 5, and it's been a lot of fun. It had been a while since I read the Federalist Papers, so I've been brushing up on them. I did take a class, which is free from Oh shoot, what's the name of the college? Shoot. Can't believe I just forgot about that. It's one of the conservative college, Hillsdale. So Hillsdale College does a free class on the Federalist Papers. It's a series of about 10, 30-minute videos. So I'm going through that to get myself brush up so I can keep up with Doug and Alan. But it's been a fun show. Federalist Papers are pretty important. Sometime in the next couple of weeks, we'll get to Federalist number 10. And that, in my opinion, is one of the two most important of the Federalist Papers. And I'm looking forward to that. So if you guys want to catch that on Patriot Soapbox on 5 o'clock on Sundays, that's a pretty good show. Going back to Mr. Epps, here's a question. Are you a Fed? No. Okay. Next. And Kassam says, it goes on like this, except remember, Epps has dinners with strangers who call on his cell phone, and he can't hear someone yelling Fed from a tourniquet's length away. Epps, on the night of January 5th, disappeared for a couple of hours, couldn't find his hotel for 2 hours, even though it's about a 10-minute walk. And this is a map that Kassam lays out that one of these Marriotts, all of them were 10 to 20 minutes away, and it took him 2 hours, so Epps was meeting with somebody is the implication. And here's Epps, who flew all the way to D.C. to listen to Trump speak, left about 2 minutes into Trump's speech so he could get to the Capitol. A little bit more inconsistencies. You want a link to this article? I can do that. There you go. Should subscribe to Raheem Kassan. Anyways, he's his Substack. He's one of the best investigative journalists we got going. The other guy, there's a couple others I read just about daily, and Darren Beatty at Revolver is a great investigative journalist. I like the work Tracy Beans has been doing, and there's a few other independent journalists that are really making a difference. All right, it's 2:58, and we have no Doug yet. Anybody want to take some bets? Hello, Monica. Hey, Kikio. Hello, Tracy. Hello, everyone. Let me give Doug a text. Oh, he just texted me. Because Ron did not email him the link, so I got to do that right now. How do I invite? And there we go. Doug should be here momentarily. So I am a terrible host. I didn't let myself into the room, and I forgot to invite Doug. I'm doing a wonderful time. Pouring rain here again. So our drought in Southern Cal is over for a while. We've had a lot of rain. And I'm going to keep an eye. I'll go ahead and kill the Ray Epps story, but it's worth reading. And now you get stuck looking at me. I should probably get my light better. And I got to sit here and keep an eye out for Doug. Feels like 2023 is going very quickly. We didn't talk. Friday night, we talked a bit about the congressional hearings. Doug and I went through on Andrew the Citizen 1776's show. We went through the list of the 10 or 12 things that the 20 holdouts got as concessions for. You want the link for the Federalist Papers on Hillsdale College? I'll see if I can find that when Doug gets here. I'll look for that later. I can't search the browser and talk at the same time. Anyways, the Republicans got it pretty. They got their rural proposals passed, and a lot of them were pretty good. think the important thing is getting an extra person on the rules committee. Yes. Sorry for your loss, Raging Smirk. And my dad's brother passed away about a week or two ago, and his service is going to be next week up in Oregon. I'm not going to be able to make it, but I am writing a letter because he was a pretty good man and a pretty good uncle, and he'd given me a stock certificate when I was a kid, and it got me reading the stock pages. So I credit him for some of my career. Mr. Gibbs.
Mr. Hamster.
How are you, sir?
I'm doing well, sir.
I'm off to a rocky start on this show. I spent the first 5 minutes talking to myself because I wasn't smart enough to let myself into the studio. And then I was reading a little bit about a Raheem Kassan story about Ray Epps. He went through the whole 96 pages of testimony, and it is a hot mess, let me tell you. I believe we'll be hearing from Mr. Epps on the stand again very soon, and I would think they're actually going to they're going to actually subpoena Kinzinger.
Are you convinced, as most of us are, that he's an informant or part of the cabal?
It makes absolutely zero sense that the one guy who's caught on video absolutely instigating violence has never, ever had a charge thrown at him, while other people who were just walking and staying within the velvet ropes are spent 2 years in a jail. So I don't think you can even make an argument that he's not.
Yeah.
But Kinzinger
some kind of privilege going on.
Yeah, Kinzinger asked. Well, you always know when you're not allowed to talk about somebody, it's sort of we weren't allowed to ask questions about a certain injection. We weren't allowed to ask questions about the manner of how we choose our representatives in Washington, D.C. We're not allowed anything. We're not allowed to. They're trying to hide something, and right. the louder their outrage is, the more likely it is that they're guilty of what we suspect them of.
Right. Okay.
I think the most fascinating part about that incident, 6 months removed from July 6th, is the fact that the FBI agent, the DC whatever agent in charge, had just been assigned to Washington D.C. about a month before, and his previous posting was in Michigan, where he was overseeing the Gretchen Whitmer kidnapping case, which was infiltrated with feds and informants. So I think that's a little bit too much of a coincidence.
Yeah.
And that gentleman is now retired, but very much still in the country. Anyways, let's get to some Constitution stuff.
Yeah, we left off on the preamble. Where's my stuff here? We left off at the tail end of the preamble. Oh, that's why I can't find it. It's under my mic. Hold on a second. We had discussed most of the preamble. We had left off a little bit and hadn't gotten to all of it. So we're to the preamble and then Article 1, Section 1, which last night in the Chino class, Monday night classes in Chino, Article 1, Section 1 was the topic. And I spent the entire hour, actually a little bit more than an hour, going through the whole thing because I explained to people, as important as the preamble is, and the other parts of the Constitution is, Article 1, Section 1 really kind of serves as a fantastic footing or foundation for what the whole thing sits on. It goes into enumeration doctrine. It goes into legislative powers. It goes into the separation of powers. It goes into the fact that we have two houses of Congress, and that those powers are granted and vested, which has a lot, which is also very important. So, I mean, there's a lot going on in Article 1, Section 1. But that said, let's wrap up the preamble. So, we, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and that's where we had left off. And I had explained, we, the people, they could have written we the citizens. They could have written we the overprivileged, white, slave-owning racists. They could have put anything, but they put we the people. And the reason why that's significant and I'll go over this real quick because I don't know if I mentioned this last week, is when the Magna Carta was written. And the barons, it was the landowners, the barons. They were basically slightly privileged. They were landowners. They were considered to be a part of the nobility. And they were complaining. And they decided that there needed to be a document that, proclaimed the freedom, the liberty, the natural rights, the Saxon system beliefs to this monarchy. And so in the Magna Carta, essentially, they put originally in the original text that we the barons got together because we wanted to make sure you see this king. And the clergy wrote it for him, but they got to thinking it's not really about the barons, it's about all freemen. So they changed the term barons in that document to freemen, that it represented all freemen. Now remember, this is a document that's a part of the history that they all knew of these Englishmen who were in the colonies. Magna Carta is an important part of their history. They recognize it as a part of their history, and they know what it says. And knowing that they knew that the barons said all freemen, which is in another way of saying the citizens and not the other people who aren't fully free, the enslaved and so forth, they could have very well have put, mirroring that in the preamble, we the freemen or we the citizens. But they rejected that and used people, we the people. And I believe that shows us how important it was in their minds to make sure they included everyone in the New World. I hate to use the word inclusive, but that's what it kind of comes across as. And then they listed 4 reasons for writing this constitution, for needing this new government, this attempt to create a balancing act that moved away from too much sovereignty of the states, but they want to be careful not to go too far and make it not enough sovereignty for the states. Balancing act, create a federal government, not a national one, that has limited authorities and can operate in a manner to enable this union, this country, to exist in this world of empires, to have a figurehead that goes to the countries as the head of state, even though it's a union and the states are essentially sovereign, to have someone and a part of government that handles those external ideas, the foreign affairs, the wars with other countries, the maritime law, trade, and so on and so forth. And then if those 4 things are done, more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, and provide for the common defense, it would promote the general welfare. In other words, it would promote a condition that all's well. Things are going well because our federal government's operating as it should. The next part is where we left off, and it says secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity. Blessings of liberty. You'll notice that blessings of liberty are both capitalized for either emphasis or because they're a proper noun. They're not proper nouns, so we know that means that it's emphasis. I have always argued that they capitalize for emphasis. The Roger Sherman copy of the Declaration of Independence reveals that quite a bit, but also I was talking to a historian a few months ago, and he said that they also taught that in the colleges, the universities, that when writing, you capitalize for emphasis. This was a practice of the time. So when you see a word that's capitalized, it's emphasis, or it's made to stand out to show you that there's some importance regarding that word aside from the normal rules of capitalization. So blessings of liberty, blessings being capitalized, liberty being capitalized, these are important words. Secure is not capitalized, ourselves is not capitalized, but blessings and liberty are. What are blessings of liberty? Blessings, when we think of the word blessings, most people think, well, gosh, that's a Bible thing or that's a faith thing. You don't hear a bunch of atheists run around blessing each other. So blessings is something that is godly. Blessings of liberty. So these are liberties that you have been blessed with. Another way of putting it is natural rights, God-given rights. Blessings of liberty are your rights. It says, secure the blessings of liberties to ourselves and our posterity. Secure. And for those of you who heard me go through this, I think this is one of the most important things I talk about, one of them. And I don't know anybody else that talks about it this way. They could have put protect the blessings of liberty. Well, after all, we feel like we want our rights to be protected. We're told that our rights can be guaranteed by government and the Constitution, our constitutionally guaranteed rights. We hear that all the time, right? And they could have put the word guaranteed blessings of liberty, but that's not what they put. They put secure the blessings of liberty. They used a different word than the word we use. We love to say protect and guarantee, and neither one of them is correct.
I was going to say, you do know one other person who argues that, because I've been making that argument on social media nonstop for the last couple of months, and it's actually led into some pretty good heated debate. So it's a strong point, and I think I've won every one of those arguments. So,
well, a lot of people want to say, well, secure means protect. Not really. I mean, protection can be a result of something being secure. That's a good way of looking at it, but it doesn't mean secure protect in the way that it's meant. So the way I like to explain it is the greatest threat against your rights are whom?
The government.
They are the greatest threat. I mean, Brady might be a threat to my rights. He might be a threat to, my right to, I don't know, drive through an intersection when he's trying to go through the same intersection. But because we are both a threat to each other regarding that right, government to make sure everything's happening in an orderly manner and with the consent of the governed, we all agreed upon this. We put up stop signs or stoplights, and we obey those laws, those rules, so that we don't run into each other. So government can be an assist, but in the long run, the entity in life that wants most to interfere with your rights because it's all about power, that's government every time. And the fear when the founding fathers wrote all of this stuff was that government would do exactly that, try to interfere with the rights, try to block our access to our rights. So we all have all the rights. And I don't think everybody understands this. Well, gosh, the slaves didn't have any rights. No, they had all the rights too. The difference between them while being enslaved and us is they didn't have access to the rights. But God didn't say, well, you're going to be a slave. I'm not giving you any rights. No. God-given rights means everybody has them. We all have our rights. They all belong to us. They're ours. The problems that arise regarding our rights has nothing to do with God and whether or not they were given to us. All of the problems regarding our rights has to do with people and whether or not they block our access to our rights. More often, that is a government that does that. So first of all, understand that any problem with rights is a man-made problem. It's a government-made problem, usually.
Well, that's your example of slavery is perfect right there, because literally the government made slavery legal so that they weren't able to exercise their own rights. That was a government-made problem.
Right, exactly. All right, so secure the blessings of liberty. So I don't believe that government and the Constitution is there to protect your rights. You protect your own rights. They're yours. I have a truck out there, and there's a locking mechanism in it. And to protect it from being stolen, I lock it. That doesn't guarantee it's not going to be stolen. Doesn't for sure mean it's going to be protected, but gosh, it's a great mechanism for working towards that manner. But that's up to me. It's not up to government to lock my door. It's not up to government to keep an eye on my truck or not leave certain valuables in my truck or whatever. That's my choice because it's my truck. And once it gets stolen, it doesn't stop belonging to me. It just, I don't have access to it. It's still my truck. Your rights are still yours, even if government gets in the way. On occasion, Warhamster in the chat room says, well, note they didn't ever use all caps. That's not necessarily true. There were a handful of times that all caps were used in certain situations, not necessarily documents. It wasn't yelling per se, but maybe extra emphasis. Jefferson was king of all caps. Matter of fact, I've got a book around here where he wrote something, and I don't want to go searching for it if I can't find it immediately. Here we go.
Yeah, I use the all caps occasionally, when I'm typing on social media for emphasis. So I completely get it. I try not to use,
and definitely in today's decorum, all caps is basically yelling. So I get that.
It's when you do an entire sentence or an entire paragraph of all caps.
Exactly.
It loses its purpose. But if you use it to emphasize certain words, and my writing style is always capitalize things more often than most grammar teachers would suggest.
Yeah, and I do that too.
When I was writing a newsletter every quarter for my practice, I would let my mom edit it, and she was a college journalism professor, so she's very good at editing the written word. And
wow.
So we let me put it this way: I don't think I've ever submitted something that didn't get at least a few corrections. So it's pretty hard to please mom. She's the original grammar police in my life.
I still am. I shouldn't say I used to be, but I love to write short stories. Don't write them as much as I used to because I'm more into the nonfiction genre right now with trying to save my country. But back in the 90s, I'd written a number of science fiction short stories, and I was submitting them to magazines like Asimov and Analog and things like that. And got a lot of rejection letters, and I expected that. And as a writer, I've got a pretty thick skin when it comes to that kind of thing. I decided, I thought the stories are pretty good. And I was wondering if maybe part of the reason I was getting rejected, and aside from the fact that at the time I didn't realize this, but I kind of had a Twilight Zone writing style. But I decided, you know what? I'm going to pay some money. I'm going to take my best story, the best one I think I've got, and I'm going to submit it to a professional editor. I'm going to let them have their way with it now because I think I can learn from this. I'm going to see what few things I'm doing wrong with punctuation or whatever it may be. And so I submitted it, paid I think it was $150 or something like that. I submitted this multi-page short story. And it came back, and there was so much red marks on it that the red markings outpopulated my typing. And I saw this thing, and I will be honest, I'm a man, but I'll be honest, I cried like a baby. It was crushing. It crushed me. And so one of the things I learned that day is everything I write isn't golden as much as I thought it was. And so I decided to spend a lot of time actually bettering my my ability in writing when it came to grammar and punctuation. I'm still horrible at punctuation, but I'm better than I used to be. Took some classes in college and all that jazz. But when it came to Thomas Jefferson, when it came to the capitalization, he did like to capitalize more than just the first letter. In fact, in his original draft of the Declaration of Independence, when referring to the slaves, he referred to them as men. And he put it in all caps, capital M, capital E, capital N for extra emphasis. As an example of him putting everything in all caps, a whole word. Now, remember, this is the same guy earlier in that same document wrote, all men are created equal and endowed with certain rights from their creator. He was recognizing the equality of those enslaved in the eyes of God, and that they were men no different than anybody else. And the book I was looking for is known as, its nickname anyway, is known as the Jefferson Bible.
Mm-hmm.
Technically, and it does say the Jefferson Bible on its cover actually, but on the side it says the life and morals of Jesus. And then once you get into the book, the title says the life and morals of Jesus of Nazareth. And what he did is he took the Gospels and he brought them down to just the teachings of Christ, removed any text regarding the deity of Christ and the miracles and all that. He just wanted the words of Christ. And he did this so they could be used as a tool to send missionaries out with, and let them have this tool to preach to the Indian population. He was afraid that the Indian population may not accept what he called the mystical part of Jesus.
Why would an atheist do such a thing?
Well, then I guess he wasn't an atheist. Or as I like to tell people, when it comes to the word deist, and even the word deist, it really depends on how you want to look at it, because sometimes the word deist was used in different ways back then as compared to now. But the common assumption today is that Jefferson and Franklin were deists in a sense that they're sort of like agnostic. They believed that there was some kind of God possibly, but they didn't know what kind of God it was, and that was that. That's the way they are characterized. And my first response usually is, well, if they were deists, they weren't very good ones. Jefferson talked about Christ and the teachings of Christ quite a bit, and Benjamin Franklin referred to Bible scripture quite a bit. So like I said, if they were deists, they weren't very good ones. But anyway, in a letter to Charles Thompson that's printed in this book, and I've got it on this page right here, it says, I am a real Christian. Real and Christian are all caps. That is to say, a disciple of the doctrines of Jesus. Very different from the Platonists, who call me, capital M, capital E, all emphasis, infidel, and themselves, all caps, Christians and preachers of the gospel, while they draw all their characteristic dogma from what its author never said nor saw. So he was one to use all caps every once in a while, and he proclaimed himself right there to be a Christian, despite tales to the contrary. All right, now, the reason why I bring all that up is because the capitalization here is huge. Blessings of liberty, our rights. To secure the blessings of liberty, secure, not to protect, not to guarantee, but to keep in place where they belong. They're our rights. They're given to us, our possession. And it says or ourselves and our posterity. Ourselves, not capitalized. Posterity, as you can see on the screen, is. Posterity then being the word of emphasis. Remember all those people in your life that tells you that the founding fathers were just a bunch of white, racist, selfish, power-seeking, racist white guys who wrote all this stuff, and that they did it for their own power and their own wealth? Remember those people? Take them to the preamble, because they tell you otherwise. By capitalizing posterity and not capitalizing ourselves, what they're saying is, hey, we did all this to secure the blessings of liberty, sure, to ourselves, but especially to our capital P, posterity, those not yet born. The emphasis is on future generations, not themselves. In other words, they signed the Constitution for you. And in the Declaration, they put on the line their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor for you, for future generations. It says so right here in the preamble. Ourselves, lowercase, posterity, capitalized. And then, when you realize that, hey, wait a second, I was told God's not the Constitution, but blessings of liberty, God-given rights, gosh, God's in the Constitution. Oh, wait, there's more. Sound like a salesman at this point. Do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America. Do ordain and establish. Now, you look up ordain, and what does it tell you? To establish. So were they being repetitious to establish and establish the Constitution? No, they used the word ordain for a reason, because to establish is just to establish. But to ordain is to establish with God's blessing. To ordain and establish. In other words, we didn't just establish this. We established it knowing that this is in God's favor. This is with God's blessing. God is a part of this document. The word God may not be in it, but right there in the preamble twice, God is mentioned. Blessings of liberty and ordain. So that's the wrap up of the preamble. Now let's get the, so you looked it up, ordain.
Yep. And you were correct. Properly to set, to establish in a particular office or order, hence to invest with a ministerial function or sacerdotal power to introduce and establish in a pastoral office with the customary forms and solemnities.
Now,
yeah, I've got a question before you move on.
Okay.
Bear with me. The final sentence for this Constitution for the United States of America, United is capitalized this time, and there are other instances where it is not. Would you like to address that?
They're referring it to its final union form, a country, the United States. So that's the proper capitalization for the name of the country. The other instances in which it says United States is they weren't referring to it as the name of the country, but as the condition of the union. For example, in the Declaration of Independence at the very beginning, because the attitude was, this is a union of states, but the united part really is not the most important part. The states of America are. It tried to put they were trying to put less emphasis on nation or country and more on the states themselves. That said, as time passed, especially here, the union did become a firmer union. And that is indeed the name of the country, United States. So they did start capitalizing it as a proper noun. Okay. That said, Article 1, Section 1. I have fun with this one. I get to play. I get to really help you get through language here. It says, all legislative powers herein granted shall be vested in the Congress of the United States, which shall consist of a Senate and House of Representatives. All. Now, we live in a political age in which words don't always mean what we think they mean. I'm here to tell you that all is a very simple word, and it's shocking to everybody, but it actually means all. All means all. When I write it on my whiteboard in my classes, I put all, and then I put an equal sign, and I write the word all. Now, I know these political knuckleheads out there, they want you to think that all means mostly, or some of the time, or it depends. All means all. All legislative powers. What are legislative powers? Legislative powers are a part of the law that has to do with the actual putting them into being or taking them out of being or modifying them. So legislative powers is to create law, modify law, or repeal law. Executive branch has a different power regarding law. It's called execute the law. Judicial branch has another power regarding the law. They have the power to apply the law. But when it comes to Congress, its legislative powers are to create law, modify law, and repeal law. Someone might say, yeah, but Doug, they can't do it unless the president signs it. No, that's not true. If he decides to veto it, they can override his veto. They can make law without the president. They are the authority over legislative powers. They're the ones that have the power to create law, modify law, repeal law. And it says herein, meaning herein, within this document, granted. When we see the word granted, that means there's a grantor or there's a grantee. What that does is that establishes for us that the states are the parents here. They held all powers prior to the Constitution. They were the possessors of all original authority. And they were willing to give up some of their authorities, their powers, to the federal government so it could function in the manner they wanted it to. But only certain powers. Not all power.
Just the ones granted specifically.
Just the ones granted. They're the grantors. And in this case, the legislative powers of federal legislative powers, the Congress is the grantee. If you look up the word granted or grant, one of the definitions you'll find in most legal dictionaries, and I'm not sure about our good friends 1820. I don't remember if this is in there, but in legal dictionaries, granted means to legally transfer.
Number 3, to transfer the title of a thing to another for a good or valuable consideration. The legislature have granted all the new land.
So to grant is to transfer or to give. Now, all powers here are granted. So there's a grantor, the states, a grantee, the Congress. The states hold all the original power. They are they're delegates of their Constitutional Convention to do this. They are the parents. They are creating this federal government by giving it these powers. And then it says, shall. Well, that sounds like a biblical word. Shall. Oh, you know what shall means? Because you've seen the Ten Commandments, right? The word shall appears a lot. Is that God telling us that, man, we ought to? No. What does the word shall mean? It's mandatory. Thou shall means it's mandatory. You must or must not. You will or will not. So all legislative powers here are granted shall, it's mandatory, be vested. Vested's an interesting word. And if you look up, well, when it comes to political legal versions of it, vested is essentially the same thing as granted, with a little bit of a swing there. It goes a little bit beyond granted because, see, this is when something's vested upon you, it's bestowed upon you. And when something is bestowed upon you in this manner, in a political manner, it only belongs to you. And you can't give it back. It's irrevocable. So vested, in a sense, means granted. It's being legally transferred. But it's being bestowed upon you in a manner that it cannot be given back. So what vested means is legislative powers only belong to Congress, not to any other branch of government. Executive power, or the executive branch can't say, well, we have some legislative powers too. No. All, remember that funny word all? Legislative powers are granted and vested in the Congress. It's legally transferred to the Congress and irrevocable. They can't give it away. Now, that's a fascinating thing because I know an awful lot of times that Congress has given away power, violating that word vested. I think one of the most glaring examples would be the Federal Reserve.
That's exactly what I was going to say. But to summarize that opening sentence of the rule of the document that governs our entire country, the greatest nation in the history of the planet, it basically says that judicial review, the ability to legislate from the bench, is not granted. It means
that is exactly right.
Executive orders have no authority.
Have no legislative authority or legal authority.
It means the grant.
They're not legally binding.
It means every.
So when he said, "Hey, you got to wear that mechanical medical device or that medical device with things that wrap around your ears," it was an edict. It was a recommendation. He can't make it.
Just finishing up the sentence summary, every power that the federal government has taken for itself that wasn't granted is necessarily stolen, and they gave away the powers that they were vested in them, especially in the case of the Federal Reserve. So,
yeah, in Article 1, Section 8, it says that Congress shall have the power to coin money and regulate the value thereof.
So we're basically
they gave that to the bankers.
So we're basically one sentence into the Constitution, and they've already violated it in 4 different directions.
Oh, yeah. And understand that the Federal Reserve wasn't the first attempt at that kind of bank. First one was what was it called? Bank of the United States.
Yep.
When did it come into being? Do you remember?
1791.
When did this Constitution go into effect?
1789.
1789. It took them 2 years to violate the very first clause. They gave away that authority to the bankers.
And they knew it because they argued about this in Philadelphia in 1787. It was argued on the floor whether they should have a national bank, and it was shot down resoundingly. but they had short memories.
Presidential power came through the UCMJ, which is pre-Constitution. Well, first of all, if you are correct, Darren, and it was pre-Constitution, then that would mean it would no longer matter, because the way that it works with the Constitution is what came before it is not what is authorized. The Constitution supersedes everything that came before it in the United States. You say, well, that came before the Constitution, right? And the Constitution superseded it.
Well, upon ratification, it did, yeah.
Upon ratification, it became the supreme law of the land. First of all. Second of all, the UCMJ only applies to military. It doesn't apply to the rest of the country. Now, the UCMJ is mentioned indirectly in Article 1, Section 8, when it gives Congress the authority to establish the rules and regulations of the military. But that's for another time. Thank you for the.
Yeah, when we get to the part,
thank you for the comment.
When we get to the part of the Constitution that talks about the formation of the military, I'm going to have some questions regarding: does the military have the ability truly, or should they have the right to supersede the enlisted men's natural rights? Because it seems that they think they do, but we'll table that for a few weeks from now.
That's a complicated answer too. So
yeah. But just keep that in your head.
We'll have fun with that. All right, I'm looking forward to that.
I'm giving you forewarning so you can start working on your answer, so I don't catch you by surprise, because it's a pretty tricky subject.
Well, I've already got the answer in my head, but I'm not going to go over it now. We'll talk about it then. I don't want anybody's heads to blow up. One of the things I've learned about doing the Constitution classes and why I do it the way I do it, and I kind of have a process, is because I've learned that people's heads have this incredible ability to explode if given too much information, or too much information they don't expect all at once.
Yeah, well,
and so I actually have a process. I do things the way I do it on purpose. Sometimes I don't get ahead of myself on purpose, because I want to make sure that you are able to properly digest this as we go through it. I could probably really go through the whole Constitution and give you the highlights in an hour or two, but you would go away with less cognizance than your neighbor, your zombies in the movies that you watch. So I really do take my time and go through this process for a reason. I want you to digest it. I want you to figure it out. I want you to apply it. I want you to move it around your head a little bit, swish it around your mouth a little. I want you to, properly come to your conclusions and really get it. And sometimes it takes a number of times to go through this, because the reality is, number one, we've been taught such garbage. It's kind of hard for us, our minds, to wrap around certain things. Number two, it is a lot of information all at once. It's a fire hose of information. And so sometimes we got to get hit by the fire hose a few times before we get some of the nutrients we're looking for. And thirdly, for lack of a better way of putting it, you're going to get pissed off because you realize it's worse than you thought. And I don't want to spend the whole time with you just pissed off. I want you to learn. So I try to do it in such a way that, your head only explodes once or twice during my lessons. So I don't have you going thermonuclear and splattered all over the neighborhood. I want to make sure that you fully are able to grasp in the end, and you're not going to along the way. There's going to be certain lights along the way that will turn on, and you'll start making connections. But I just want you to go through the process. That's why sometimes I don't jump ahead. Go ahead.
Well, no, I'm just going to say I'm a really good example of what you just discussed, because I was pretty ticked off about a lot of things for a lot of years. But when I started coming to your class, you basically have kept me in a simmering rage, and I've never quite gone into berserker anger level yet. But it's it's learning to keep that bottled up inside and how to apply it in a productive manner.
Right.
The best way to do that is to share the information, and that's what I spend a great deal of my free time doing. The
beginning of activism is being informed. Can't be an activist if you're not informed. And so this is step one in however many steps the program is. But step one is being informed. So understanding what's going on.
This is probably a good time for me to share the story of how I actually found Doug in the first place.
Okay.
Yeah. My one of my guys sharing office with, Brian, is a good patriot, and we've been, we weren't that good of friends when we shared an office together for 8 years, but we were friends. He was a nice guy, but once COVID hit, we started texting back and forth, and he was very well informed and cared. And we found out that we were a lot more closely aligned politically than we thought. and I was very isolated during COVID. I mean, I was, I didn't, I got my business shut down. I took a beating. I had some very good friends that helped me keep my sanity. After the 2020 election happened, Brian and I were talking on the phone. We were saying, it's like a month and a half later, we're late December of 2020. And we're going, we got to do something about it. It's not enough just to keep talking about things. We got to get involved. And we agreed with each other. And the question was how. We were businessmen. We weren't activists. I'd been involved with the Libertarian Party previously, and that left a bad taste in my mouth. So what happened is one night after probably too many cocktails, it's like after midnight, I'm watching a YouTube channel, and there's this guy talking all kinds of fire and brimstone with his wife, and it's Dr. Cordy Williams. And at the very end of the show, and I'm half asleep, and I'm typing away on the computer with the YouTube on in the background of the TV, I hear, and we host a Constitution class every Thursday in Carlsbad, California. I perk up, hit the rewind button, take down the information. I call Cordy the next day, and it was a Wednesday night. So the next day was a Thursday class, and I showed up at Doug's class that evening, and we met for the first time. And I have almost not missed a single class in 2 years since. But I was instantly hooked. I go, this is the stuff I need to know to take me to the next level. So that's what
you say when you perked up. When he said what he said, I in my mind I imagine a prairie dog in the middle field, kind of.
Yeah, I probably spilled my cocktail at the time. It was like, what? Local? For the record, Carlsbad is maybe 15 minutes away from me. So it was an amazing coincidence that happened. I mean, had I not heard that one sentence out of Cordy, then I never would have met Doug. I never would have met all of you. So it's weird how the world works. And now Doug's stuck with me.
Yeah, and the thing is, a lot of people enjoy going through it a number of times because they're still learn each time, and also because there's certain political things going on in the world. Sometimes my delivery might change a little bit because I'm using more modern or more recent examples. But the thing is, one of the most common questions I get is, "Gosh, though, but Doug, how do we get from there to here?" That's kind of what we're talking about too, and I want you to know this because we need to be armed with this knowledge. I do appreciate all the people in my audience. And one of the things that I've noticed is a lot of people in my classes, and they'll talk about it with their friends, talk about their friends. They can't ever get their friends to show up. But once they get a person to show up, they go, whoa, where have you been all my life? Because we talk about stuff that nobody else is talking about. And I do it in such a way that people can relate. People understand, and it's things that you're just not hearing. Mainstream media is not going to tell you this. Your professor is not going to tell you this. Heck, the high school U.S. history teacher won't tell you this. And so, and the other reason why I love doing these classes on top of all of that is because of the communities that form. You guys that are in the chat, for example, you guys, you are a community, and some of you that are in the chat are also members of the community in the classes I teach. This morning I was at Fallbrook. I think we had, I counted at one point, I think it was like 20 or 22 people or something like that. And it's a neat little community. The one on, Carlsbad, that's a real tight community. It's a family. And so there's more to it than just, going through the Constitution. And it's okay to go through it a bunch of times. Number one, because you're always going to learn. And number two, even if you're not, you're part of a community and you need to be in that community. And because you're going to hear things also from other people in the room that might say, hey, we got such and such event coming up. Hey, great. I'm glad I'm here. I wouldn't have known otherwise, kind of thing, So there's all kinds of advantages to these classes. But anyway, I want to wrap this up. We got about 15 minutes left. I want to finish up Article 1, Section 1. and because I want to talk a little bit about the houses of Congress. So we know that all legislative powers, the power to make law, create law, modify law, repeal law, are granted and vested in a Congress. But then it says, which shall consist of a Senate and House of Representatives. What a lot of people also, and yes, that's true, Joy. PSF is kind of where I, kind of got my start through this particular program. I've been teaching classes in person since 2008. I've been doing online stuff since 2007 in the sense of back then it was online radio through Blog Talk Radio. And I've had a blog since 2006. So been at it for a while, but PSF was definitely a big help. But anyway, so now a lot of people don't know this, but under the Articles of Confederation, and even before the Articles of Confederation, that Declaration of people don't realize, hey man, when the Declaration of Independence was written and signed and went into effect in 1776, we actually technically didn't have much of a government. There was a Continental Congress and the states. And the Continental Congress was basically a way for the states to send their delegates into a big room so they could hash it out. That's all. That was it. That was the government of the United States. It wasn't really very organized. It was actually quite disorganized. It wasn't a real union per se yet. It was kind of a union in the sense that they said, hey, we're a union. That's about as union as it became. So we have to realize that the government was different and there really wasn't much of a government. And the Continental Congress during the times of the Declaration and under the Articles of Confederation was a single house or unicameral legislature. One house, bunch of delegates got together, hash it out. But here we see in Article 1, Section 1, there's two houses. There's a Senate and there's a House of Representatives. Now, from a professional, political, legal viewpoint, the Senate is the upper house and the House of Representatives is the lower house. By saying that, it's an admission that they're different. They're different from each other. One's a little more lofty than the other, I suppose you could say. And so we've got this bicameral Congress, bicameral meaning two chambers. I knew that and then had forgotten one time. Someone says, what does bicameral mean? And I'm literally going, couldn't remember the exact way of saying it. And then this guy named Todd, which Brady says, is familiar with, he says, two chambers, man. I'm like, I know that. Why I forgot right when you're sitting there, I don't know. But nonetheless, bicameral means two chambers. But why two chambers? Well, upper, lower, because they're different from each other. The best way for a legislature to operate properly is for it to have two chambers that are different from each other. What's called a dissimilar system, dissimilar houses of Congress. And it kind of brings back that old saying. I'm sure you've heard it. Oh, two heads are better than one. Well, when someone says two heads are better than one, that doesn't mean two of the exact same heads, right? That's not the point. Because if it's two of the exact same heads, they're looking at the same thing, or seeing it the same way, and come to the same conclusions. Then what's the point of having the second head? Two heads are better than one. That comes from two different people looking at something, but they bring something different to the table. If I was an engineer, man, and I've got all the whatever it is on my desk, and I'm looking at the different numbers and this and that, and I'm like working it out. And I'm like, man, something's not right here. I don't know what it is. I need a second opinion. Hey, Brady, come here. I need you to take a look at something. He walks in, and he looks at it. He says, oh, yeah, the answer is obvious. You got an error on that calculation right there. See that formula? That's the wrong character. You should have put that. Oh, now that makes sense. Now that, and that all fit in. Thank you. Took a second head, a different mind, a different way of looking at it. Have you ever, as a writer too, you know how hard it is to proofread your own stuff? You need someone else who looks at it differently to read it, to spot those things. Okay, go ahead.
I'm going to absolutely butcher this story, and I hope someone here in the chat can correct me and dial it in. But there is somebody in the military that has a rule that I don't even know what it's called, but like the 10th person in the room, after the first 9 said yes, their entire job is to argue the opposite approach. And it was a military setting, and I can't remember where that story comes from.
Well, George S. Patton has a saying, that a quote that says, "If everybody is in agreement, someone is not thinking."
There you go. So the big difference to me between the House and the Senate is who they're supposed to represent. And this right here is the true separation of powers. Because the Senate represented the states legislature, and the House of Representatives represented the people. And every single thing in this document, refers back to the states and the people being the final authority. So basically what Article 1, that opening sentence is saying is the states and the people have their representatives, and they are the only ones who can make law.
And both sides must be happy with it. So they naturally check each other. And there are different ways of looking at things. So the states might say, hey, you know what? This is a great idea. And the people looking at it from a different idea, looking at it and go, nope, no, it's not a good idea. The people will suffer. And here, let me show you how.
It's like I always say, the states are supposed to check the federal government. The people are supposed to check the states. Nobody gets to check the people.
Exactly. And so you've got these 2 dissimilar houses, the 2 heads coming up with legislation. And then you get that third look from the president. And if the president likes it, he signs it. And if he doesn't, he vetoes it. But if it's so good that the 2 houses of Congress say, no, this is so good, I don't care what the president says, we can override him, they can with 2/3 vote from each house. And that veto is nothing. Now, that said, you'll notice, though, there's checks and balances everywhere. And this is the beginning of the checks and balances system. This bicameral Congress, these 2 dissimilar houses check each other. The states check the people check the states. And then once they come up with something, the president can check it with a veto or sign it. And then, once again, if it's good enough, they can override that veto 2/3 from each state, or from each house. The point is, we don't just have one house for a reason. 2 houses works. Looking back in history, they knew it works, and you want them to be different. Historically, the houses were set up so that, for example, in Rome, you had your assembly, which was the peasants or the people, and then you had the Senate, which was the wealthy and the powerful, and that was more of the approval, and that's where the judges and the executive branch also was housed. There was not a separation of powers. The consuls and so forth were all in that house, but they were different from each other. Okay, you go to the British parliamentarian system, same thing. You've got the House of Commons, the House of Lords. You got the voice of the people. You have the aristocracy. But the thing is, here in the United States, we don't have an aristocracy, or at least we're not supposed to. I know unofficially we seem to, but from a constitutional standpoint, there is no aristocracy. And so instead of having an aristocracy, we have kind of a pseudo aristocracy where the Senate was the voices of people who've been in the system. They're well respected, and they were appointed by the state legislatures. And because of their experience, because of their knowledge, because of their position where they're supposed to make the states happy and they consider states' rights rather than the passions of the people, as you see from the House, when Thomas Jefferson returned from France and he had read the Constitution for the first time in a foreign land, because he was in France during the convention. But when he came home and he asked George Washington, tell me about this bicameral Congress. What's your opinion about the dissimilar houses? What's the point there? And George Washington said, what's with like when you drink your tea, you have your hot tea in your cup and it's too hot to sip. So you pour a little bit into the saucer And when it cools down, then because it gets cooler faster in that saucer, and then you sip it out of the soft saucer, and that's your cooler tea. He says the House of Representatives is the cup, and the Senate is the saucer. The petty and hot passions of the people reside in the House, but the saucer, the Senate, is where the cooler heads prevail. Brilliant way of looking at it, and that's exactly what it's supposed to be. But the problem is, of course, as we've talked about before on this show, 17th Amendment eliminated the voice of the states. It changed the way the Senate was originally designed. We'll get into more details as we move further through the Constitution, but I want you to think about this, how we have these two houses, and they're supposed to be different. What's the point of having two houses if they're exactly the same? We have two houses right now that are voted in by the people, and the only difference is they serve different terms, and there's a couple of different authorities, such as ratifying treaties, confirming appointments, and hearing the trials for impeachments belong to the Senate. But other than that, what's the difference between the two? There really isn't one. So then what's the point of having two houses? The reason we have two houses is because they are supposed to be dissimilar. They are supposed to be different from each other. They are supposed to be two heads are better than one. They're supposed to be. And I argue that if we're going to get back to liberty, we've got to get the recipe right. The recipe is messed up. It has been changed. The recipe is actually fine. We've added ingredients to the recipe we're not following the recipe. We've added ingredients or changed ingredients that shouldn't have been changed. Instead of garlic, we're putting garlic powder. And guess what? It threw off all the taste. Let's go back to the original garlic and make this work properly. And that, in my opinion, is to get rid of the 17th Amendment and get back to the two dissimilar houses, where one is the voice of the people and the other one is the voice of the states.
The final word in that
Tracy, Elvis, settle. Sorry, go ahead.
See me grinning at that. It's all right. He'll get a treat. He was protecting us. The word representative, to me, is the real key right there, because who do our current Congress members actually represent? That's not their local constituency. They represent a national political party. You saw that all last week as we were trying to get a Speaker of the House vote with the McCarthy hearings. The Democrats 100% voted in lockstep with their party every single time. There was no independent thought or saying, "Gee, what do my constituents want?" We no longer have a House of Representatives that represents. They basically, their job is to go out there and sell themselves to a voting bloc that can possibly give them enough votes to send them to DC, so they can then represent the national political party.
They eat the party, drink the party, vote the party. They are the party. And that's all that they can do is, but it's the party. It's a collectivistic way of looking at it, isn't it?
Well, it is, and it's wrong. It's deadly wrong. Hey, insert the Brady Amendment right here. The way to beat the national political party system is to defund them. It's all about money. So, and my amendment,
with money comes power. So you're right. It's about the money. But with money comes power, and they know the two are connected.
But we could defund, and the funniest thing is that both Republicans and Democrats will go out there in the campaign, tell you how much they can't stand Citizens United, which allowed all these super PACs and super PACs and corporate money, and yet nobody in the 10 plus years since that Supreme Court decision happened has put forward one bit of legislation to repeal Citizens United, and they can do that tomorrow or yesterday. So that's why we need my amendment. And the amendment is simple. Only registered voters should be allowed to contribute to campaigns. The Supreme Court has said that donating is protected free speech. Well, the only people who are allowed to participate in the political process are registered voters, period. So that's very simple. If you're not a registered voter, you cannot contribute to a political campaign. And that wipes out the super PACs in day one. And the second part of it makes a lot of sense because we're all opposed to foreign interference in elections after 2016. Is no campaign dollars, campaign contribution dollars can cross state or county lines, depending on the race. If we put that into place, we solve the entire representative question, right? In a heartbeat. Now, what are the chances of that happening? Well, we do know some people, including one of our regulars here, who's I don't think is here today. I didn't see Stephanie, is actually going to try to get that amendment or a version thereof put forward in Michigan. So we'll see what happens. And I've been sharing the idea with a lot of people around the internet over the last few months, and pretty much unanimous approval of it. And say, hey, tell us more. What can we do? So I think we need to start formulating that plan here in 2023, because we absolutely have to get back to the House of Representatives representing the people.
Tracy says, well, gosh, who's in that much of a hurry to drink their tea? Now, remember, their teacups are about half the size or a third of the size of what our teacups are today. Wasn't much tea, and it got cool fast. But, that said, now remember, they were Englishmen, and you know how the English are about their tea. Anyway, so next week, we've got next week's going to be interesting. I'm going to do what I can to make sure I am on time. I should be on time. I have an event that I'm speaking at in Temecula called the Keeping the Republic PAC. The event I think they start meeting at 10:30. It starts at 11. I'm speaking by like 11:30. So I should be out there by 1:30 or 2 or something like that. And it's in Temecula, which is the next town over. So I should have no problem getting here by 3. If for some reason there is an issue, I will keep the War Hamster and Ron, who could not be with us today, abreast of what's going on. But I am speaking to a group in Temecula next week. So, and so I will be coming in hot from that. But once again, I do believe I'll be here in time. Now, that said, next week, what we will talk about is Article 1, Section 2, which focuses on the House of Representatives. And included in that, and this is your teaser for next week, included in that discussion about the House of Representatives is how the representatives are chosen based on population and the condition of the country at that time, which was that there were slaves. Well, gosh, if it's based on population, how do you count the slaves? That's where the 3/5 clause comes in. And I'm here to tell you, not only is the 3/5 clause not racist, it's exactly the opposite.
Yeah, McClanahan just his most recent video, or one of his videos from last week, made that exact same case. So I will repeat what he said, and it'll be in agreement with you as usual.
Yeah, the more and more I hear about Brian McClanahan through you, the more and more I realize I need to start listening to his videos and get in touch with the dude.
Yeah,
this is a person I should know.
Yeah, absolutely, and I've actually been trading some comments with him over the past week on Twitter. So okay. I think I'm going to be able to make that happen very soon. He's been rather impressed with some of the ideas I put forward, and he's given retweets on a couple of them, and we've had the opportunity to chat a few times. So this is something that I hope happens. I think he's one of the brighter minds from a constitutional standpoint. And the fact that he agrees with us, obviously is an endorsement to how smart I think he is, but I might be a little bit biased.
Well, one of my favorite statements I've ever heard you make is that Brian McClanahan and I are in agreement 99% of the time, and he wants to be in the room to watch that. But when we are in our disagreement for that 1% time, he definitely wants to be in the room. I got a kick out of that.
Yeah, I will referee that discussion for sure.
All right. My peeps, I love you. Appreciate you. Thank you for being here. United we stand. Combined we kick butt. God bless America, my friends. God bless you. Thank you for spending the time with me. Don't forget, I am at politicalpistachio.com, douglasvgibbs.com. And if you want to purchase my latest book, it is available. As a matter of fact, Stephanie got it, and texted me a picture of it. It's called Repeal Democracy. Can't find it at Amazon? No problem. Go to politicalpistachio.com on the right-hand side. Go down a little bit. I advertise the book in the sidebar. I will have copies of the book hopefully in 3 or 4 weeks, at which time I will be able to start selling them in my store. and then you don't have to deal with Amazon. You can get an autographed copy from me for the same price.
Real quick,
If you want it now, Amazon.
Real quick before we sign off, I just
Sure.
wanted a little factoid. In the 1828 Webster's Dictionary, the word bicameral does not exist, but it does exist in future later dictionaries. That's a bit of a mystery. But
Mystery.
that one did not show up in the 1828 Webster's.
That is interesting. Yeah, that has me wondering. I might have to do a little research on that. All right, my friends. Love you. Stay safe. Stay constitutional. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, everyone. Cheers.